Welcome back to Movies TV Mad. You can follow me on X at Movies TV Mad, and you can follow me on Instagram and on Threads, Movies TV Mad X. So make sure that you do so you never miss anything. A very warm welcome to Saturday's edition of the DC Universe Daily. So yesterday was a huge day for Warner Brothers Discovery as they had their financial call. First of all, let's give you your DC update. So, breaking news, James Gunn is developing alongside with the writer of Minions, a Jurassic League movie, an animated movie. I have no idea what Jurassic League is. Let's be clear if you're watching me for the first time. I'm not a comic book guy, I'm a comic book movies guy. I'm a comic book animated movie guy. I'm a comic book TV guy. I'm a guy who loves TV and movies generally. So I'm not a reader of books and I'm not a reader of comic books. So I have no idea what Jurassic League is, but it's something to do with DC and it's part of James Gunn's huge plans. David Zaslav at the financial call also said that there will be further announcements about DC Studios' future plans and the DC Universe's 10-year plan from James Gunn and Peter Safran coming in the coming months and weeks. So that's something to look forward to as well. He's also saying that they're going to start casting for Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow. There was no mention of any director. I'm quite sure they already have a director earmarked for that movie. The rumour is it's Kate Herron from Loki, who, was running the first series of Loki. I think this would be a disaster, but I'll react to it when it actually happens. No point reacting to something that we don't know is true or not. So that's definitely the next movie they're earmarking in developing Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow. He says the script is done. He's read the script. He likes the script. And he also said, and this is the thing you're all going to want to know, that Superman Legacy will go into production, start filming next week. Now that's earlier than I foresaw, so that's exciting. Superman Legacy starts shooting next week. Of course, we had a table read, we had a group selfie, which we discussed yesterday, all about the casting of Otis. I'm very concerned about that. It looks to me that they're going to make Otis, Miss Tessmacher and Lex Luthor a bit of a sitcom, a bit of a joke. It looks like that's the direction James Gunn's going in. If that's the case, I'll be hugely disappointed. And to me, it looks like they're trying to mimic Superman the movie with that element of the movie. But we will see. Now, with those updates out the way, and actually, one more thing, there's still no word on a completed script for the Batman 2 as well. We've discussed this before. Just remember, I'm the pioneer who told you that Andy Muschietti wouldn't be directing Brave and the Bold. They claim he is. I don't think he is. Remember that. Just remember, I'm the guy that nobody watches, nobody listens to, and I normally always get it right. I said the Batman 2, there would be no way the Batman 2, would be released next year. You have to be one of the dumbest people, one of the dumbest studios in Hollywood, which we know they still have that title, by the way. We'll get into the details of the financial call yesterday. Not numerically, I'm not going to give you numbers and stuff, but I will tell you what happened and how negative it was for Warner Brothers Discovery. You have to be the dumbest studio in Hollywood to announce a release of next year for the Batman 2 when you know that Matt Reeves is a notoriously slow writer of scripts and stories. We saw what happened with the first Batman film. But no, they decided, even though they know he's a slow writer and a perfectionist and has more drafts of a script than an alcoholic, right? He has more drafts than an alcoholic. It's ridiculous, right? It's not, look, I'm not having a go at Matt Reeves. He has every right to take his time. But you shouldn't be announcing a release of a movie when you don't even know it's going to be released that year, right? And I cannot see that movie being released next year. I mean, we already know that Superman Legacy, a movie that's actually going to be released next year, next July, is going into production, going into filming next week. That's the last week of April, beginning of March, right? So that movie is obviously going to be released next year. But the Batman 2, I just can't see it. And again, I'm happy to take an L on this, but I don't think that I will be. Anyway, you know, I talk to a lot of DC fans that keep on telling me that the share prices of WB are crashing. And as I record this on a Saturday morning, the share prices have crashed again. And I'll tell you why. Because there was a financial call from David Zaslav. And the color purple lost 40 million. They had 4 DC comic book movies that all lost money, that all flopped. Now they did well with Barbie and Wonka. But unfortunately, those 4 DC movies that failed really caused them a problem. And the Flash movie was the one that lost them a lot of money. They were desperate for that movie to make money. But that's David Zaslav's fault for insisting that James Gunn announce the DCU while they still had 4 movies from the, you know, the other DC franchise, the DC Extended Universe, to come. And James Gunn interfered with a couple of those movies. The Flash movie for sure, and Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. We heard from Dolph Lundgren telling us it was a better movie before it was interfered with. That clarified what I said to you when I saw the test screening. I saw a much better movie. I did a video telling you it was a compelling, serious movie, that something, you know, devastating happens in that movie. We didn't really see that because they turned it into a colourful, jokey piece of shit. And James Wan and Jason Momoa was not happy. But of course, Jason Momoa apparently has a future over at Warner Brothers, and apparently he's going to play, if you believe he's playing Lobo. I mean, there's been so many hints, but we just don't know. But anyway, it's clear to me that James Gunn didn't want Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom to succeed, and may have even said to Zaslav, listen, you may lose money on this movie now, but we don't want, you know, Momoa playing Aquaman. You know, we'll give him this I suppose, olive branch of Lobo just to keep him quiet. And I think that's the plan, but we'll see. So basically, the financial call yesterday wasn't received well by Wall Street, and their share prices sunk. So can James Gunn, save this studio? Because that is the situation. They are banking, they are putting everything, they're gambling everything on Superman Legacy. Make no mistake about it. And, the movie has a lot of hype and support online. You think about the cast for Fantastic Four were announced around a week ago, and now nobody's really talking about that movie. People, the internet is talking about Superman Legacy. There's no question about it. Where is this support coming from? Is it studio bots or is it real fans? We had so much hype for the Flash movie and it was a flop, right? People went to see it at CinemaCon and said it was great. But when you release a movie in its entirety at a place like that, then those ordinary people who saw it, because it wasn't just, access media and influencers, it was other people who got to see that movie there as well. You lose the anticipation and more people going to see it. So that was done as well. Let's hope they've learned their lesson and don't do that with Superman Legacy. So there's so much hype, but they're banking, they're gambling everything on James Gunn's DC Universe plan. And especially Superman Legacy. We've spoken before, if that movie doesn't succeed, they are fucked. It's not just James Gunn who's fucked, it's Warner Brothers Discovery. Let's look at Warner Brothers Discovery since the merger, since David Zaslav came in. Early on when he came in, there was rumours that he wanted to sell the Cartoon Network. People went mad, so he couldn't do that. He wanted to sell the Turner Classic Movie Channel. Steven Spielberg and famous directors said, you can't do that. So he couldn't. he sold the CW, which we later found out after the sale never made a profit. But they never tried to sell it in the past because they didn't have to. When you're coming in and you want to sell, your properties like Cartoon Network and TCM, it means you are a company hemorrhaging money. Warner Brothers and Disney, the two biggest studios in Hollywood, are hemorrhaging money per second because they devalued their company. Disney devalued their company via the culture war, via diversity and stuff like that. And Warner Brothers devalued their company through creative bankruptcy. AT&T was a fucking disaster for Warner Brothers because basically they're a cable and wireless company who have no clue how to run an entertainment company. David Zaslav has admitted he has no experience in scripted entertainment, but he's not here to create Warner Brothers as an entertainment conglomerate again. He's here as a fixer to fix this, to type, imagine you've got a house that's got a leak and you keep on trying to plug the leaks. That's why David Zaslav came to Warner Brothers. That's why the Discovery merger happened. So he could fix the company so then it will be in kind of a good shape to sell or to merge. Make no mistake, Warner Brothers Discovery will either be sold, as I've told you before, or merge with somebody else. Now, this creates a deeper question, which we've asked before, but we must ask again. I must be honest, as a content creator, it doesn't matter if one person's watching, 0 people's watching, it doesn't matter about that. I've got to be honest and fair to you, my subscribers and my viewers, and paint you an honest picture. I can't pretend that everything in the garden is rosy. I can't pretend that I know that Superman Legacy is going to be the bestest movie ever. But as I've tried to speak slowly and explain to those of you who don't get it, when I hear exciting news about Superman Legacy, I'm going to be excited. When I hear something like the Otis casting that kind of gives me some red flags, I'm going to tell you I'm a bit concerned about them trying to mimic Superman 78, and I suspect they're trying to make Lex Luthor and those 2 other characters, Otis and Miss Tessmacher, a bit of a joke. I hope that's not the case. All I can do is give James Gunn the benefit of the doubt because of what he's done in comic book movies before and with Peacemaker before, right? So he's clearly a competent writer-director. There's no question about that. And I've never said anything different, right? But here's the question I keep on asking, and it's going back to yesterday's financial call, which was a fucking disaster. Now, Zaslav claimed that, he came in, he's fixed the problems, and now they can move forward. Talking about a Harry Potter Max streaming series. Again, how can you take Potter? First of all, rebooting Potter is a huge mistake. They should have done everything to bring back the original cast and do Cursed Child or continue from the last Potter movie. Not Fantastic Beasts, but the last Potter movie in cinema. And if they also want to do a streaming show about another character from that world, that's fine. But this is part of Zaslav's inexperience, because if you're taking $1 billion per movie, IP, and shoving it and rebooting it on Max, a streaming service, trying to build that streaming service up, you're making a mistake. You're losing money, because we all know, something we didn't know before. There's not much money in streaming. That's why they're all going commercial. This is why they're all going ads, right? At the moment, you can choose with a lot of streamers whether you go with ads or ad-free. I believe ad-free will be something that you won't even have the option for in the next 3 to 5 years. There's no money in streaming. There's no money in just subscriptions. You need the advertising, which they weren't doing before. And now they've realized they need it. That's the point. Again, I'm trying to educate you about the industry and about Warner Brothers. As I said yesterday, if you're a DC fan, we must talk about Warner Brothers. So the point I'm attempting to make very badly is when Warner Brothers is merged or sold, what happens to DC Studios and James Gunn's and Safran's plan? Do the new owners or the new partners say, yeah, James Gunn, carry on. Listen, according to them, Superman Legacy starts filming next week. Okay? That's it. It's happening. That film is being made. Now, we've seen what happens in the industry today. Sometimes, films are shelved and things like that. I don't think this is going to happen, right? But I do believe they're using Superman Legacy as a part of a selling point or a merger point to say, look what we've got, a Harry Potter series. We've got, a DC universe being developed. We've got a Superman movie, being produced and being filmed. We're here. We're active. And again, to be fair to them, Barbie and, what was the other film I mentioned earlier? Wonka. That's it. I forget so easily, don't I? Anyway, so Wonka and Barbie made a lot of money for them. But those two films, I think, were green-lit from the previous leadership. If you've noticed since Zaslav's come in as well, less movies are being made. Less movies are being green-lit because the money isn't there. It's a company, and it's hemorrhaging money. And actually, let's say that again, when this company is sold or merged, what happens to DC? David Zaslav may not think about this. Just think about this as well. And we discussed this as well before. If they do merge or sell WB, I don't think Zaslav will remain as the CEO. Because I've told you before, Zaslav is just a micromanager. He's just a fixer. He was there. AT&T did the merger. AT&T still have the majority shareholding of Warner Brothers Discovery. Discovery is a minority shareholding. If you're a Manchester United fan, it's very similar to Ineos's shareholding, right? Discovery have the same kind of shareholding of Ineos at Manchester United. But just like Ineos, they're running the footballing side, and Discovery are running, the actual Warner Brothers company, even though they're minority stakeholders. It's interesting how I support Warner Brothers, it's my studio because it owns DC. And Manchester United, I support Manchester United, and now they're kind of being run with similar structures. And I think Manchester United will be sold eventually, but I think that Ineos are again these fixers. So Jim Ratcliffe is this fixer. He's come in to make it financially, to create a financial structure so it's in a more healthier position to sell, so the Glazers can sell it for more money. And I think it's the same with Warner Brothers Discovery. This April, he can legally talk to people about merging and selling WB. And you have to say, if that happens, that Zaslav won't be in control. So the guy who decided to do a DC Studios, who decided to put James Gunn and Peter Safran in charge of DC Studios, if we're being honest, won't be around after a merger and a sale. So they're making a Superman movie. There's no question about that. If that movie doesn't make the money, then, the new leadership is going to be less likely to keep James Gunn on. Now, I suppose Zaslav I don't know what Zaslav would do if Superman Legacy fails. Business is business, right? But it may not fail. It may succeed. Listen, one thing we do not know is whether Superman Legacy will succeed or not. Gunn has a great record with comic book movies. Yes, that's right. I can hear you shouting about the Suicide Squad being, a flop, but there are extenuating circumstances that had nothing to do with James Gunn in that movie failing, if we're going to be honest. So James Gunn is putting together a plan, a latest announcement for an animated feature on Max with this Jurassic League thing. It's all very, very interesting, but will it all come to fruition? Can he save Warner Brothers? Because one thing's for sure, Superman Legacy has to be a film that people want to watch. But, to be fair, the hype is there. There's a lot of excitement and hype for Superman Legacy. But does that hype and excitement equate to box office sales? Now, if we look at the Flash movie, that had around the same hype as Superman Legacy, that didn't equate to selling tickets. And there's a lot of suspicious accounts, for example, on Threads I don't know if you've been on Threads before. You should follow me if you do, at Movies TV Mad X. But I don't spend a lot of time on X. I post DC Universe Daily Bite Size. I retweet and make, I make a few posts on that platform, but I find it quite boring because it's full of shills. There's nothing wrong with being positive about your entertainment, but they overdo it. And, for me, it's about being subjective and being able to be balanced about discussions. But when I saw one post yesterday go, "Oh my God, James Gunn, I love you. James Gunn, you're the best." It's like seeing a bunch of cheerleaders like waving their pom-poms. It's utterly ridiculous. Are these studio bots, as I said earlier, or are they actually genuine accounts? I have no idea. If you check, there's a lot of newly kind of created accounts on Twitter and Threads. Now, we identified that with the Flash movie. They've admitted before in the past. The guy who runs Max admitted that there was some studio bot accounts created, in the past. So this is the kind of thing that they do. So the hype for Superman Legacy may not be a genuine hype. And you're excuse me, but you're asking me, Mick, why would the studio create bot accounts? To create hype, to create artificial hype, so they can then other people see it and they go, "Oh yeah, this is really, everyone's talking about this movie. I better talk about this movie as well. I better check this movie out as well." That's the idea. So at this moment in time, nobody has any idea if the hype for Superman Legacy is real. But there's no question, there's more hype for Superman Legacy than there is for the Fantastic Four or anything else in the MCU. The only thing that's got any real hype within the MCU is Deadpool and Wolverine. There's no question about that. And that movie should win big. All the shills are going on and on about that movie. So you would expect that Deadpool and Wolverine will do well. There's no reason to think that it won't, but we'll have to wait and see on that one. But Superman Legacy has the whole weight of a studio's expectations. They've put everything on James Gunn. They've gambled everything on James Gunn being the filmmaker to save this studio. And for Superman Legacy to save this studio, this movie has to make around $800 to $1 billion. It has to create something. It has to be the beginning of something, because the money-making potential of Superman Legacy, because if that movie's successful, then the whole DCU can potentially be successful. If it fails, that's it. It's not just that. If Superman Legacy wins big, Wall Street reacts positively, right? If Superman Legacy fails, Wall Street won't react positively. That will be the end of Warner Brothers. If he doesn't sell, if he doesn't merge with another company by that time. But what is interesting is, and I made the point the other day, by the time Superman Legacy finishes principal photography, Warner Brothers could already be in discussions or would have decided to sell or merge the company. Isn't that interesting? And that puts James Gunn in a very, very interesting position. If they do merge or sell, James Gunn is under even more pressure. He has to be successful. Because if he's successful with Superman Legacy, even a new ownership isn't going to disband that plan. James Gunn speaks a good game. We've seen some positive things coming out of Superman Legacy and some things that I have questioned. For a reason, we are here to question things. Now, this industry, people in entertainment don't like to be questioned. There's an ego there. Now, it's an interesting situation because I've never seen a film where the weight of expectation from a studio is on it so heavily. Because Warner Brothers have made some big decisions in the past from previous leaderships. Now, in the next 6 or 5 minutes, I want to talk about, creative, artistic integrity. I want to talk about Richard Donner. I want to talk about Tim Burton. And I want to talk about Zack Snyder. Because all these things have led Warner Brothers where they are today. We look at Dick Donner. He came on, he brought on Tom Mankiewicz to rewrite the script and story of Superman the movie. They made the first superhero comic book movie blockbuster. It made a lot of money. Then they fired him. They fired him because he wanted to spend money. He wanted to get it right. And he got it right. He got it right for them, and they fired him. Now let's look at that. What did that mean for Warner Brothers? Warner Brothers didn't fire him, and they couldn't do anything. Their hands were tied because the Salkinds fired him. It's important to understand the Salkinds fired Dick Donner, not Warner Brothers. But what did that mean down the line? It meant that Superman 2 didn't make the money it could have made, right? They made the excuse that it was out at the same time as Indiana Jones Raiders of the Lost Ark. That's just bullshit, right? Superman 3 made 100 million. Back then, that's still a lot of money, but not the money that Superman the movie made. And Superman 4 was a disaster and a flop. Firing Richard Donner was a domino effect. Now let's go to Tim Burton. When Tim Burton was allowed to direct Batman 89, he was a very young, upcoming director. I think he'd already done Beetlejuice. So the reputation was there, but it was a very different type of director. You know, if you looked at him, he just looked like a hippie. He looked really, really weird. He didn't look like your typical director. He wasn't. He was kind of an arty student type of director. He was a pioneering, director. He was very interested in stop motion and things like that, and new techniques. He was his own man, right? So he made an artistic Batman movie. That movie made money. They were kind of happy with it. So he was allowed to make Batman Returns. So just like Snyder's BVS, Batman vs Superman Dawn of Justice, Burton doubled down on his artistic vision. Now, parents complained, like there's that moment when Penguin bites that guy's nose off, and parents were not happy. And also WB, with the way Burton went along with that movie, didn't have much merch for kids to sell and put in McDonald's bags and things like that. So Batman Returns didn't make the money that Batman 89 did. It did okay, but it didn't make the money. I think Batman Returns is a much superior movie than Batman 89, by the way. And even Tim Burton has said that he's more proud of Batman Returns. I think Batman Returns is a brilliant movie. And it's not overstuffed for the idiots who say that. Anyway, they said to him, no. He came back to do a third movie. They said no. Because they wanted Joel Schumacher to come in, make it bright, colourful, campy, so they could sell it to families, right? So he knew where he stood. He wasn't happy, but they stopped him. But at least he made 2 awesome, epic Batman movies. Here's the thing, before I get on to Snyder, because I think this is an important point to make. Companies like Warner Brothers and Disney don't own DC and Marvel because they want to create artistic DC and Marvel movies. They want to make money. They don't understand the only way to make money in entertainment, the reason Hollywood became such a valuable commodity, is because they made great artistic entertainment that people loved and people could be able to escape from their dreary lives from. This is why entertainment became such a big business model. And now they've devalued that model, right? But my point is, they own DCWB to make money. And they think making money and artistic integrity are 2 separate things. They don't understand. It's one in the same. But the question became, when Snyder took over DC and Nolan and Goya, the question was, should comic book movies just be making money, or should they have artistic integrity? These were the discussions we were having at the time, if you remember, especially when we were fighting to release the Snyder Cut. So Zack Snyder directed Man of Steel. Nolan and Goya wrote the story, and Goya wrote the script for Man of Steel. Man of Steel was the brainchild of David S. Goya. Well, he had writer's block doing The Dark Knight Rises. So basically Warner Brothers were all for that. Oh my God, David Goya and Christopher Nolan, they gave us the Dark Knight trilogy. It's typical Hollywood. They thought, well, they made us a lot of money there. Let's bring them in. But then Christopher Nolan goes, I want the Snyders to work with me on this movie. And everyone at Warner Brothers remembers Watchmen and, how it was a divisive movie. Some people loved it, some people hated it. I think it's an outstanding movie. But as I said earlier on, I'm not a comic book person. I'm not a comic book reader. I'm a comic book movie guy. I'm a comic book TV show guy. I'm a comic book animation guy. So I don't know. I'm not as deeply embroiled in comic books and lore. I know a lot of the lore, but I don't know it religiously. That's what I'm trying to say to you. And so the studio didn't really want Zack Snyder, but they were in a position where they felt, Nolan, the Dark Knight trilogy, we've got to listen to him, right? Or he's going to fucking walk. Let him bring in Snyder. And so Snyder directed the movie, Goya wrote the story with Nolan, and it made near on $700 million and a lot more on physical media and digital media. The movie is beloved today by more people than hate it. But there are haters there, there's no question. But there's more lovers of Man of Steel, and the movie is aging very, very well. And then Batman vs. Superman Dawn of Justice doubled down on Snyder's artistic integrity, because Nolan and Goya were removed from Batman vs. Superman, even though, it claims in the credits that Goya wrote, the story, but he didn't. He wrote a sequel for Man of Steel that he wasn't allowed to do. They weren't allowed to do that because Warner Brothers weren't happy with the amount of money Man of Steel made. 700 million or just under 700 million is still a good return, but it cost a lot of money to make and they weren't pleased with that return. So Snyder had already gone into doing BVS. So they did BVS and it was one of the most, the toxicity, that came after that movie was huge. We all know that. We were there. We remember it. But as soon as he did BVS, he went into production of Justice League. So they were really concerned by this time. So he did Justice League. They drove him off. The rest is history. Then they injected that movie with Joss Whedon's, colour and gags, and it was a fucking disaster. We all know that. So there's a lesson here that, Warner Brothers were under a hell of a lot of pressure at the time with the Snyderverse because there was a divide. Some people hated it. Some people loved it. Those first two movies brought in some money, but not the money the studio wanted. And there was always all this toxicity going around it, which was making Wall Street nervous as well. There's a lesson to be heard here, and it's, first of all, artistry and, integrity is very important. Warner Brothers used to be the biggest art house in the world. And then when the MCU started and Disney were doing Marvel and it was being successful, they became obsessed with becoming like the MCU. So what are they, where are we now? Well, I'll tell you where we are now. They got in one of the MCU directors to run DC because they're obsessed with the MCU, which also doesn't make money anymore for different reasons. So the question of Snyder was, should they have allowed him to cook? Or were they right to get rid of him? And it's a very interesting question because, as I said earlier, they own these IPs, they own DC because they want to make top dollar from it. But they're the ones who brought in Christopher Nolan. They're the ones who allowed him to bring in Zack in the first place. And probably Zack, if you want to make the MCU money, probably Zack wasn't the right person in the first place. But once you've got him there, you've got to allow him to cook. We've had these discussions before. But what Hollywood, not just Warner Brothers, what Hollywood has become, it's become greedy. It's become a total business. And it wasn't a total business before. It was about making artistry. And the blockbusters would pay for the artistry. We discussed that in a previous video. That's not what it is anymore. They've become such a business that they're so greedy and they're so focused on making money and getting the right Rotten Tomato scores and cinema scores that they've been driven to make dumb decisions that now have devalued their businesses. And one of the core reasons for this was the driving out of Zack Snyder. It's not the only reason that Warner Brothers find themselves on their knees now. Because if they allow Snyder to finish that, then they could have naturally progressed with someone else like James Gunn. But they didn't do that. And they went down another avenue. They panicked. They were reactionary. And they caused a divide between them and their own customers. And that's one thing you should never do.